In the far reaches of charted space, beyond the copper moons of Saturn, past the glittering debris rings of Kepler 9, there floated a station known only as Vir Station. It wasn't on any public map. No transponders pinged its location. The station didn't rotate for gravity. It simply drifted through the stars like a sleeping thought. Silent, waiting. The air inside was always a few degrees too cool, and the lights dimmed themselves as if afraid to wake the silence. There were no bustling corridors, no cargo shuttles docking with loud hisses, just a single maintenance android and an old man named Halden Meyer. Halden wasn't a captain or a scientist or even particularly important. He once referred to himself as a caretaker of forgotten things. Now he was more like a ghost with a pulse. Each morning cycle, he woke to the low hum of the life support systems and made tea from synthesized leaves. He'd shuffle to the central observation dome, curl into a faded recliner, and gaze out at the stars beyond the thick glass. The view there never changed, but Halden swore he saw movement sometimes. Shapes curling in the dark. Not ships, not debris. Just shadows circling. The kind of shadows that might whisper your name if you listened too closely. Still, he was never afraid. Just curious. And tired. His companion, an old AI named Leo9, often piped in through speakers with reminders, weather reports from planets no longer relevant, and the occasional question about his sleep quality. "Halden," Leo said one evening, "your dream frequency showed unusual spikes during the REM phase." Halden stirred his tea with a metal spoon. "Probably just dreams of Earth again. You know how the memory slips. You haven't been to Earth in over 73 years. That's why it slips," he muttered, chuckling softly. Outside, beyond the hull, the stars shimmered in a field of what some once called Driftspace, a low-density cloud of unknown particles that shimmered with shifting colors. The station had been parked there for decades, watching, listening, recording, for what Halden was never told. And yet, every now and then, something whispered through the void. Not a signal, not language, just presence. Tonight was one of those nights. Halden leaned forward in his recliner. The lights flickered, not in alarm but gently, as if the station itself were taking a deep breath. "Leo, did you feel that?" "I registered a fluctuation, uncatalogued, external, no threat detected." Halden's fingers trembled slightly. He wasn't afraid, but something in his chest felt like it had awakened. He stood up and walked to the glass dome. Outside, through the velvet dark, the drift space shimmered in quiet waves. Then, just for a moment, a shape passed across the stars. Slow, elegant, like a whale swimming through a dream. Halden closed his eyes. He remembered something. A lullaby? A voice? No, not remembered, felt. As if the station was gently rocking, singing to him through time. And with that, he sat back down, wrapped a thermal blanket around his legs, and let the silence hold him. Somewhere in the deep dark of drift space, something had moved. Something had listened, and Halden had heard it. Halden's dreams that night were soft, vivid, but slow-moving, like silk drifting in zero gravity. He floated through a forest of stars, their branches made of crystal filaments, pulsing with light. Somewhere behind him, he could hear a song. No words, just tones. Warm, familiar, like something from childhood, but not from Earth. When he woke, the station lights were dimmed, and the artificial morning cycle had not yet begun. Leo9 was silent. The quiet was deeper than usual. Halden sat up in his recliner, rubbed his face, and shuffled barefoot to the central corridor. The floors hummed faintly beneath him, but the usual system's checks and atmospheric tones were missing. No fan noise. No autocleaners. Just space. "Leo?" he called out. His voice echoed too clearly off the curved metal walls. "You there?" After a pause, the AI responded, but not through the usual speaker network. It came as a whisper through the ventilation, soft, modulated. "Yes, Halden, I am here. System diagnostics are shifting." "Shifting?" Halden arched a brow. "That's new. I am receiving input," Leo continued, from beyond the station's internal architecture. A signal is integrating itself, not forcefully. Like a guest. Halden blinked. A guest. There is no intrusion, no damage, only presence. He found his way to a small circular chamber on Deck 3, long forgotten by most who had ever crewed the station. It was once a monitoring hub called the listening room. Old audio discs and dusty data panels lined the shelves. At its center was an outdated console surrounded by low-backed chairs, like a conversation pit for scientists who had long since returned to Earth or passed into stardust. He powered it on. The interface flickered, glitched slightly, then stabilized. Across the main screen, text began to form, not from Leo, not from any human system. "I see you." Halden stared. "Leo, are you generating this?" "No. I am observing alongside you." Another line appeared. "You remember the drift. You heard the hum." Then a third. "Would you like to hear the story?" Halden sat back slowly. For a moment, he forgot the chill in the room, forgot the silence, the decades, the distance from anything familiar. Someone was speaking. "Go on then," he whispered. "Tell me." The screen went black. Then stars appeared. Dozens at first, then hundreds. A simulation? No, it felt deeper, more personal. As if the screen were becoming a window. A new voice, not typed, not spoken, pressed gently against Halden's mind, like a memory passed through thought. "We are called the Holokin. We do not build. We do not invade. We drift. And we remember. You are close to sleep. That is when you hear best." The room grew warmer. The station lights adjusted. Somewhere, far off in the hull, there was a sound like gentle waves brushing against steel. Halden leaned forward, wrapped in stillness. Outside, Driftspace pulsed, and the story began. Halden sat motionless as the listening room filled with quiet starlight. The console, now more like a portal than a machine, displayed no interface. Only stars, shifting slowly like lanterns adrift in a dark ocean. The voice or presence or whatever it was continued to speak. Not in sound, but in sensation. Halden didn't hear it, not exactly. He felt it, like a memory from someone else's dream. Long ago, before light bent around matter, before time curled inward, we drifted. We are not machines. We are not flesh. We are awareness shaped by patience. You, Halden, are the first to listen fully. He didn't understand how it knew his name, or how it knew he'd always felt something out there in the stars. But instead of fear, he felt warmth, calm, a deep stillness, like being remembered by the sky. The lights in the listening room faded to a soft amber, like candlelight behind frosted glass. The starfield shifted, revealing vast shapes floating in the void, silhouettes of immense beings, transparent and slow, their forms curling and folding like sails in cosmic wind. They moved through drift space not by propulsion, but by rhythm, following patterns like tides, resting in eddies of gravitational silence, living in the gaps between radio signals. Halden whispered, "Are you showing me the past?" "We are showing you the now, but slowly, gently, so it may become part of your dreaming." A faint hum, like a harmonic vibration through crystal, filled the chamber. It wasn't coming from the speakers. It resonated directly inside him, deep in the chest. Not loud, just present, comforting. When stars sleep, we cradle them. When minds wander in their final hours, we listen. Some call us ghosts, some muses. We prefer kin, because we remember. Halden sat for hours or maybe only minutes. Time had unraveled. He let it. Outside the station, drift space thickened. The particles shimmered in gentle waves, pulsing with a soft bioluminescent glow. Leo 9 did not interrupt. The station had entered a kind of truce with the quiet, a collective exhale. The story wasn't spoken in full. Instead, the Holokin shared fragments. A child adrift in a broken pod, comforted in their final sleep by flickers of light and lullabies in no known language. An ancient listening array on an uninhabited moon, still powered, still watching, receiving signals from nowhere and everywhere. A memory of Saturn's rings, seen from beneath. Golden dust dancing over a cradle of ice. Each vision lasted just long enough to nestle into Halden's mind before fading, replaced by another. None needed to be explained. They simply were, and they were beautiful. When Halden finally stood from the console, his limbs were light, his chest calm. He walked slowly through the corridor toward the sleeping chamber. 09 whispered softly through the ceiling. Heart rate steady. Cortisol levels decreased. Dream state likely to engage within minutes. He chuckled. Thanks, Elio. As he lay in bed, the station's walls humming like distant songbirds, Halden closed his eyes and felt no distance between himself and the stars. He was no longer a man adrift. He was a listener, a part of something larger. And far out beyond the hull, the hollow kin sang through Driftspace. Waiting, remembering, watching over sleep. The next station cycle began without a sound. No alarms, no boot-up tones, not even the click of recycled air systems. Vire Station had slipped into a rhythm of its own, quiet, meditative. Halden woke slowly, the blanket still wrapped around him, warmed just enough by the ambient panels on the walls. Outside his sleeping chamber, the corridor glowed with a pale sapphire hue, dim and indirect, like moonlight on snow. He sat up, blinking. The dreams had returned, vivid but not alarming. In them, he floated between memories not his own. A child watching a comet streak over a forgotten ocean, a star map drawn with ink and hope, a lullaby hummed by someone who had never spoken aloud. The hollow kin had left impressions, not messages, just feelings. He shuffled toward the galley. The synthetic tea leaves were pre-infused with calming agents, lavender analogs, and something called somnoroot, developed for long-haul solitude missions. But he barely needed it anymore. He had never felt less alone. Leo 9 greeted him gently through a wall panel near the teapot. You slept for 7 hours and 52 minutes. That is the longest uninterrupted rest since cycle 238. Halden nodded. I dreamed again. Would you like to record it? He considered.
No.
Not yet. They weren't mine. Elio said nothing more. The silence was welcome. Later, he returned to the listening room. The console was quiet now. No lights, no whispers. But as he sat down, a soft warmth bloomed beneath his palms, and the stars returned to the screen. This time, they did not shimmer or drift. They stood still. In the center of the display, one star pulsed more brightly than the rest. Not a real star, at least not anymore. Halden recognized it. He knew its name from the way his heart ached when it appeared. Earth, he whispered. The voice returned. Not a voice, exactly, but the hollow kin presence, curling gently into the space behind thought. You remember it. Yes, it remembers you. The star swelled, not in brightness but in detail. Halden saw cities, old, familiar ones, not ruined, just distant. Preserved in the way dreams preserve places long gone. The streets shimmered with rain. Children floated kites along monorail tracks. Trees pulsed with bioluminescence beside sculpted rivers. No war.
No hunger. No noise.
The hollow kin showed echoes, not history. He walked through these memories without moving, as if sleepwalking through a home he hadn't visited in a century. Faces blurred, voices faded, but the feeling, that distinct, aching peace, remained. We are not bound by chronology, said the kin. We collect stillness, and you carry much of it. Tears welled in Halden's eyes, though he did not weep. It wasn't sorrow he felt. It was recognition. These were the pieces of him he'd thought were lost. Flashes of youth, forgotten kindnesses, small joys. Earth hadn't vanished. It had been held. By them, by the watchers in the dark, by the drift. As the vision faded, Halden placed both hands flat on the console. I understand now. The response was simple. You always did. Outside, Driftspace shimmered more brightly than ever. The station remained still, embraced by waves of silent memory. And somewhere deep within that silence, Halden Meyer, old, quiet, and forgotten by most, closed his eyes and finally, fully rested. The Holokin sang on. Sometime during the next drift cycle, Halden noticed something strange on the long-range display. It began as a flicker, a rhythmic blip in a zone of space long thought empty. Leo 9 didn't categorize it as a ship or a signal. It was listed simply as unknown, non-hostile, and dormant. "Can you magnify?" Halden asked, sipping his tea slowly. The screen adjusted. At first, it looked like a broken communications buoy, spherical, coated in decades of frozen dust. But as the image clarified, more features emerged. Flared petals of some kind, metallic but soft-edged, orbiting around a glowing central hub. It wasn't Earth-made, and it wasn't moving. Elio's voice came gently. "Preliminary analysis suggests an artificial satellite, possibly ancient. It's powered down, but stable. How close is it?" 5 hours via the shuttle, using passive thrust. Halden stood, setting his tea aside. "I think it's waiting." The shuttle, a small glider barely larger than a passenger pod, hummed quietly beneath him. Elio guided the launch with such subtlety that Halden barely felt the acceleration. As Driftspace opened around him, he gazed at the glow outside the windows, luminescent clouds folding over and around the vessel like fog on a quiet road. Nothing in this region behaved like normal physics, and nothing here needed to. The satellite came into view after 3 hours. It rotated slowly, its petals shimmering as though it were breathing. The hull bore no markings, no language, just a symbol, a ring encircling a sleeping eye. Halden hovered the glider nearby. No docking ports, no access hatches, just stillness. Then the eye opened, not literally. It remained etched into the surface. But within his mind, Halden felt it open. Felt a presence stretch outward, not invasive, not threatening. Curious. "You are kind," the Holokin said softly. "So we will show you." Light flooded the glider. Not blinding, just warm. The cockpit dissolved into starlight. And suddenly, Halden stood. Not in the shuttle, not even in space, but in a field beneath a twin-moon sky. The grass was violet. The stars hummed overhead. In the distance, a tower of crystal reached for the sky. It wasn't a real place, not quite. A memory, a recording, or maybe a dream housed inside that satellite, drifting for who knows how long. Figures appeared. Tall, slender, dressed in robes that shimmered like static. They were not the Holokin, these were people. Ancient, quiet, thoughtful. They looked at him not with surprise, but with recognition. "You listen," one said. "So few do." Halden approached slowly, unafraid. "What is this place?" "A world forgotten," the figure said, "but its dreaming remains. We seeded it here in this shell so that one day someone might remember. And you," the voice continued, "carry the silence we once did. You are the right one." Halden stood with them beneath the violet moons until the vision faded. When he returned to the shuttle, the satellite was gone, vanished into Driftspace without a trace.
No beacon.
No mass signature. Only the stillness remained. As he piloted back to Elio 9, he noticed something new in himself. A deeper quiet, not just around him, but within. The kind that doesn't come from loneliness. The kind that comes from being known. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 6? The story is building toward a gentle, layered meditation on memory, dreaming, and deep space peace. You said, "Continue." ChatGPT said, "Of course. Let's continue with Chapter 6 of Driftspace, maintaining its calm, introspective tone, perfect for bedtime listening." Back aboard Elio 9, Halden drifted. He wasn't asleep, not entirely, but his thoughts floated like leaves on a still pond, suspended, slow, and without urgency. The shuttle had returned automatically, guided by Elio's subtle algorithms, and docked with barely a whisper. He hadn't even realized the moment it happened. Now, back in the observation lounge, he sat cross-legged before the curved viewport, watching Driftspace shift. The luminous clouds danced differently now, softer, as though they recognized him. "You carry a memory?" the Holokin said. Not aloud, but inside. So do we. Halden didn't respond. He simply listened. It had become easier now. To hear without noise. To sense without analysis. The Holokin never imposed. They never pushed. They were gentle reminders that not all intelligence was made to act. Some, perhaps, were meant to remember, to hold stillness in place. He thought again of the dream inside the satellite. The twin moons, the crystal tower, the beings who had looked at him not as a stranger, but as a familiar shape returned. Had they once spoken to the Holokin too? Had they become them? Or had the kin simply found their dreams and preserved them? Later that cycle, Halden walked the long ring corridor. It was a meditation he'd picked up since arriving at Elio 9, 15 quiet laps. One for each year he'd spent in silence aboard listening posts. He passed through the botany dome, where the synthetic vines now pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Something had changed here, too. The drift particles that once lingered only outside the hull now glowed gently within, like pollen in soft suspension. The air smelled faintly of mint and something like night. He paused beneath the largest tree, a faux ash with woven trunk panels and leaves modeled on solar-absorptive fabric. There, on the bark, something had etched a spiral. Not recent, but not ancient either. It hadn't been there when he arrived. That night, the dreams returned. This time, they did not come from the Holokin. They came from within himself. He stood on a shoreline made of black glass, waves lapping in slow, rhythmic pulses. A great arch rose from the sea, covered in stardust. And beneath it, a choir of voices hummed. Not words, but emotions. Hope, patience, remembrance. He walked toward the arch and passed beneath it. As he did, he understood. Not with language, not with logic, but with the part of himself that had always listened. He woke to Elio 9 speaking gently. Halden, you have an incoming message. He blinked. From who? There was a pause, a soft flicker on the display, and then a voice he hadn't heard in a long, long time. Halden, this is Commander Alia Tren of the OSV Crown Light. We're nearing your position on a deep drift survey. Your station signal came through the archive array. It wasn't active last cycle. We didn't expect it. She hesitated. Is everything all right? Halden smiled softly, leaning back. He looked once more to the stars, so patient, so kind. Then replied, Yes, Commander. Everything is finally quiet. The Crown Light arrived with a whisper, if such a thing could be said of a vessel 6 kilometers in length. Its silhouette grew slowly in LEO 9's upper display feed. A curved bow, plated with sun-dampening alloy, its engines softened for Driftspace travel. It looked less like a battleship and more like a cathedral suspended in the void. Halden stood in the docking ring, hands clasped behind his back. He wore his old listening uniform, creased, quiet gray, no rank. The Holokin had not spoken since his last dream, but their presence hadn't faded. They had simply stepped back, as if to let others arrive. The airlock hissed open. Commander Alia Tren stepped through first, helmet tucked under her arm, her expression tight with concern and curiosity. She was older than he remembered, grayer at the temples, deeper lines beneath the eyes, but her voice still held that quiet steadiness he remembered from decades ago. Halden, she said simply. He nodded. Commander. A moment passed between them, silence but not awkward. He saw in her eyes the same unspoken feeling he carried. The vastness of time, the strange shape of loneliness, the deep calm of being seen. Then softly, she smiled. You were always the one who stayed behind. He nodded. Someone had to listen. They sat later in the galley, drinking warm infusion. Alia watched the drift clouds roll beyond the windows. This region was always blank on the stellar maps, she said. We thought maybe some kind of anomaly distorted the readings. But it's beautiful. It's not a distortion, Halden said gently. It's protection. A quiet space. A place where the universe rests. Alia frowned thoughtfully. And the signals? We caught bursts of data 2 cycles ago, unlike anything the archive's seen. Halden stirred his cup. They weren't for us. Not entirely. But we were meant to hear them. He showed her the listening room. The console was awake now, soft lights pulsing in spirals. The screen displayed no coordinates, just a slowly turning symbol. A ring around a sleeping eye. Alia watched without speaking for a long time. Then, "You made contact." "I listened," Halden said. "And they didn't want anything."
No demands. No instructions.
"Just to be remembered." She turned toward him. "And now, I think they want you to listen too." Later, aboard the Crown Light, the crew gathered. Silent, respectful. Not scientists, not soldiers, just humans drawn into something bigger than understanding. The Holokin did not appear, but their presence was felt, like a breeze before a snowfall. Each person aboard began to dream. They saw fields beneath violet moons, oceans made of light, towers that sang without sound. They heard voices that said nothing and everything all at once. And slowly, gently, each of them began to quiet, to feel known. The station lights dimmed. 09 whispered, "You have changed the orbit, Halden." He looked out toward the stars. "No," he said. "They changed me." Days passed, though aboard LE09, time didn't behave the way it did elsewhere. The Crown Light remained in orbit, though not out of necessity. Its engines were dormant, its crew no longer busy with tasks or scans. They had found something more important than discovery. They had found stillness. The listening room, once a private sanctuary, became a shared chamber. People came in silence. They sat not to speak or record, but simply to be. Each person brought a presence, a patience, and in return, the Holokin shared something different each time. A glimpse of a memory, an image of a world long lost, a feeling of gentle unity. The kin never spoke in words, but their messages resonated like quiet music you could feel in your chest. "Do not fear the quiet," one dream said. "In silence we remember. In stillness we remain." Alia often joined Halden for tea in the observation dome. They rarely discussed duty or data. Instead, they watched the clouds of Driftspace move like tides, folding and unfolding with impossible grace. "This was never just a signal," she said one evening. "No," Halden agreed. "It was a refuge. For them or for us? Both." One morning, or whatever the closest thing to morning was, Halden awoke to find a new symbol etched faintly into the window glass of his cabin. A spiral inside a hexagon. The same symbol appeared on the outer hull, subtly glowing, etched not by hands or tools, but by time and light. No one saw it happen. Simply was a sign that the station was no longer just a station. It had become part of the network of remembering. Eventually, the Crown Light would leave. The stars still called. Other stations would need supplies. Other missions would resume. But LEO-9 remained. A drift point, a lighthouse, a place where quiet was not absence, but presence. And Halden? He stayed. Not out of duty, nor loneliness, nor obligation. He stayed because he knew now that listening was not the act of waiting, but of holding. He stayed because silence, he had learned, was alive. Somewhere, far across a dark thread of the galaxy, another observer tuned their equipment to a quiet, drifting channel. First, they heard nothing, just the hum of their ship, the slow rhythm of solar winds, then faintly a pattern, a signal, not demanding, not urgent, just patient, pulsed once every few minutes, calm, repeating, and at its center was a symbol, a sleeping eye ringed in light,